Everyone says Ross was the problem, but if you watch the show today, you will realize that the real villain of the group was always Phoebe.
Wow, that is a strong opinion. Are you serious?
Yes, I am serious. People always talk about Ross and his mistakes, but they ignore Phoebe's behavior.
I never thought about that. Phoebe is funny and different. Why do you think she's the villain?
Okay, let's start simple. Phoebe looks kind and innocent, right?
Yes, she is sweet, a little strange, but very lovable.
Exactly. She looks sweet, but when you pay attention, you see something different.
Like what?
She often makes uncomfortable comments. Sometimes she says things that hurt her friends, but she smiles so people don't notice.
Can you give an example?
Sure, Phoebe likes to say things about Monica and Chandler's relationship. Sometimes she makes jokes that are not really nice.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. She sometimes creates tension between them.
Exactly, and she does it in a very calm and playful way.
But maybe she is just joking.
Is she? Or is she being passive-aggressive?
That's interesting. I never saw her like that.
Another thing, Phoebe often puts herself above the group. She acts like she is more spiritual or more special.
Yeah, she does talk about her beliefs a lot.
And when someone disagrees with her, she doesn't always react well.
Really?
Yes, she can be very stubborn. She doesn't like to be wrong.
That's true, now that I think about it.
And let's talk about honesty. People say Phoebe is honest, but sometimes she is just rude.
Ha, that's a good point.
Being honest is good, but hurting your friends is not.
Yeah, there is a difference.
Now, compare that to Ross. People criticize Ross a lot.
Yes, especially in relationships.
True, Ross makes mistakes, big mistakes, but he shows his emotions clearly.
He is very emotional, yes.
Exactly. You always know what Ross is feeling. He doesn't hide it.
While Phoebe hides things behind jokes.
Yes, that's the difference. Ross is obvious. Phoebe is subtle.
Impressed. Wow, that actually changes how I see the show.
Right? That's why watching this series again as an adult is so interesting.
So you think people misunderstand Phoebe?
Totally. People see her as the funny, weird friend, but she is more complex than that.
And maybe a little dangerous?
Maybe. Not dangerous like a villain in a movie, but emotionally tricky.
That sounds scary in a different way.
Exactly. She can change the mood of a situation very quickly.
I think I need to watch Friends again now.
You should. And this time, pay attention to Phoebe.
Okay, I will. But I still like her.
That's the best part. You can like her and still see her flaws.
That's true. Nobody's perfect.
Exactly. And that's why Friends is still so popular.
Real people, real problems, and a lot of humor.
Stay with us because in the next part, we will talk more about Phoebe's behavior in specific moments.
And maybe we will change your opinion too.
See you in part 2.
See you.
Okay, so now that we started this idea, let's go deeper.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking a lot about what you said. It changed how I see Phoebe.
Good. That means you're watching the show with a different perspective.
So, what moments show this villain side of Phoebe?
There are many small moments. That's the important part. Phoebe is not obvious. She works in subtle ways.
Okay, I'm listening.
Let's talk about how she interacts with Chandler.
What about it?
Phoebe often makes jokes about Chandler not being good enough for Monica.
Oh, wow. Yeah, she does that sometimes.
And the problem is not just the joke, it's how often she repeats it.
So, it starts to feel real, not just humor.
Exactly. Words have power. Even jokes can affect people.
That's true in real life, too.
Yes, that's why this is interesting. Friends looks simple, but it shows real behavior.
What about Monica? Does Phoebe treat her the same way?
Not exactly. With Monica, Phoebe sometimes questions her choices.
Like what?
For example, when Monica is very organized or controlling, Phoebe doesn't just joke, she challenges her.
But isn't that normal between friends?
It is, but Phoebe often does it in a way that creates doubt.
Doubt.
Yes, she makes Monica feel unsure about her decisions.
Oh, like emotional pressure?
Exactly. Small comments that stay in your mind.
Wow, that's actually deep.
And again, she hides it behind humor.
So people don't take it seriously.
Yes, that's why it's hard to notice.
What about Rachel?
With Rachel, Phoebe sometimes acts like she is more wise or more free.
Yeah, she always talks about her strange life.
Exactly, but sometimes it feels like she is judging Rachel's lifestyle.
Like Rachel is too materialistic?
Yes, that's a perfect example.
I never saw that as a problem before.
Because it looks harmless, but over time it creates distance.
Curious. And Joey?
Joey is different.
Of course he is.
Because Joey is usually kinder to Phoebe.
Really?
Yes, because Joey is simple and honest. There's no competition.
Oh, so she doesn't need to challenge him.
Exactly, there's no tension there.
That actually makes sense.
Now, let's talk about something very important, Phoebe's past.
Yeah, she had a very difficult life.
Yes, she had trauma, problems, and a very unusual childhood.
So that explains her personality, right?
It explains, but it does not justify everything.
That's true.
And sometimes Phoebe uses her past to win arguments.
Really?
Yes, when someone disagrees with her, she brings up her difficult life.
Oh, like emotional defense.
Exactly, and it works because people feel bad.
That's actually very smart in a manipulative way.
Yes, that's the key word, manipulative.
Slowly. Wow, I didn't expect that word for Phoebe.
Most people don't. That's why this discussion is interesting.
So you think Phoebe controls situations?
In small ways, yes.
Not like a villain in a movie.
No, not dramatic, more like real life.
Yeah, real people do that too.
Exactly. That's why it feels realistic.
So is Phoebe a bad person?
No, she's not a bad person.
Okay, good.
She's a complex person. She has good and bad sides.
Like everyone.
Exactly. But the difference is people ignore her bad side.
While they focus on Ross's mistakes.
Yes, that's the main point.
So maybe Ross is not the biggest problem.
Maybe not.
This is starting to feel like a conspiracy theory.
Maybe it is.
So what should people do when they watch Friends again?
Pay attention to the small details.
The tone, the jokes, the reactions,
Yes, watch how Phoebe talks to each friend.
and how they react to her.
Exactly, that tells you a lot.
I think this changes the whole experience of the show.
It does. It makes it more real and more interesting.
I like that.
In the next part, we're going to compare Phoebe directly with Ross.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
Team Ross or Team Phoebe?
I don't know anymore.
That's perfect. So, we said something very interesting before.
About Phoebe affecting the group more?
Yes, and I think we need to explore that idea more carefully.
Okay, how exactly does she affect the group?
Not in a loud way, not like Ross.
Yeah, Ross is very obvious.
Exactly. Phoebe works in quiet ways.
Like small comments?
Yes, small comments, small reactions, small changes in tone.
Things that seem unimportant but are not.
Perfect. That's exactly it.
So over time, these small things create bigger effects.
Yes, it's like a slow influence.
Can you explain that better?
Imagine water dropping on a rock.
Okay.
One drop does nothing, but many drops over time change the shape of the rock.
Oh, that's a really good example.
That's how Phoebe works in the group.
So she changes people little by little.
Exactly.
And do the other characters notice that?
Not always. That's why it's powerful.
Because it happens without attention.
Yes.
That's actually something we see in real life, too.
Exactly. That's why this discussion feels real.
So, what kind of influence does she have?
Emotional influence.
Meaning,
She changes how people feel in a moment.
with jokes?
Yes, but not only jokes.
What else?
Tone, timing, and words.
That sounds subtle,
It is. That's why it's hard to see.
but very effective.
Exactly.
So, in a way, she controls the emotional direction of conversations.
Yes, that's a very good way to say it.
That gives her a lot of power.
More than people realize.
But do you think she does it on purpose?
That's a difficult question.
Yeah, because intention matters.
Exactly. I don't think she always plans it.
So, it's natural for her.
Yes, it's part of her personality.
That might be even more interesting,
Why?
because it means she influences people without trying.
That's a strong observation.
And that makes her even more unpredictable.
Exactly.
So the group adapts to her without noticing.
Yes, that's the key dynamic.
Can you give an example of that?
Think about moments when Phoebe says something strange.
That's a lot of moments.
True.
Go on.
After she says something strange or uncomfortable, the group reacts.
Yeah, they usually laugh or change the subject,
Exactly. They adjust to her.
instead of questioning her.
Yes.
That's interesting. They accept her behavior as normal.
And that changes the group's standards.
Standards?
What's acceptable, what's normal, what's okay to say?
Oh, so she shifts the limits.
Exactly.
That's actually very powerful.
And very realistic.
So the group becomes more flexible because of her.
Yes, but also more tolerant of uncomfortable situations.
That can be good or bad.
Exactly.
So Phoebe is not just a character, she is a force in the group.
I like that word, a force.
And every group has a force like that,
Yes, someone who changes the energy of the room.
even without trying.
Exactly.
So maybe the real impact of Phoebe is not what she says,
Go on.
but how people react to her.
That's a very important point.
Because reactions create dynamics,
Yes, and dynamics create relationships.
and relationships define the group.
Perfect. Now this is getting philosophical.
Just a little.
But I like it. It makes the show feel deeper.
That's the goal.
So, where does that leave us now?
Now we are ready to understand something bigger.
Which is
The role of Phoebe in the story as a whole.
not just in moments, but in the entire group dynamic.
Exactly.
So, she's not just a funny character.
No.
She's part of the structure of the group.
Yes.
And maybe an essential part.
Maybe more essential than we think.
Now comes the big question. Ross or Phoebe?
Yeah, this is the moment. Who is really worse?
Let's compare them step by step.
All right, I'm ready.
First, let's talk about emotions.
Ross is very emotional.
Exactly. Ross shows everything he feels.
Sometimes too much.
Yes, sometimes too much. He gets jealous, insecure, and nervous.
Yeah, especially in relationships.
Right. Now compare that to Phoebe.
Phoebe is more calm?
Not exactly calm, more controlled.
Controlled.
Yes, she chooses what to show. She doesn't expose her emotions easily.
Oh, so Ross is open and Phoebe is selective.
Perfect. That's the first big difference.
And being open can be good, but also messy.
Exactly. Ross creates problems because he reacts too much.
While Phoebe creates problems without reacting.
Yes, that's a great way to say it.
So Ross is chaotic and Phoebe is strategic?
That's a very good comparison.
Wow, Phoebe sounds like a chess player now.
In some situations, she kind of is.
Okay, what's next?
Let's talk about honesty.
Phoebe is honest.
Is she honest or just direct?
What's the difference?
Clearly, honesty is about telling the truth with respect. Being direct is just saying things without thinking about the impact.
Oh, so you can be honest and still hurt people.
Exactly.
And Phoebe does that a lot.
Yes, she says things that sound true, but they are not always necessary.
Or kind.
Exactly.
And Ross?
And Ross also hurts people, but in a different way.
Because of his actions?
Yes, his mistakes are visible. You can see them clearly.
While Phoebe's actions are more hidden.
Exactly. And that changes how people judge them.
People forgive Phoebe more easily,
Yes, because her behavior feels lighter.
even when it's not.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about relationships.
Good point. Ross struggles a lot with relationships.
That's an understatement.
True. He gets jealous, especially with Rachel.
And he overthinks everything.
Yes, he creates problems from his insecurities.
And Phoebe?
Phoebe's relationships are more stable, but also more distant.
Distant?
Yes, she doesn't depend emotionally on others as much.
That sounds like a good thing.
It can be, but it also means she doesn't invest deeply in the group.
Oh, she keeps a distance.
Exactly.
So Ross is too attached and Phoebe is not attached enough.
That's a perfect summary.
This is actually very balanced.
Continuing, now let's talk about responsibility.
Thinking about it, Ross usually feels guilty after his mistakes,
Yes, he apologizes. He tries to fix things.
even if he fails again.
Exactly.
And Phoebe?
Phoebe doesn't always take responsibility.
Really?
Continuing, she often moves on quickly, like nothing happened.
Oh, so there is no consequence.
Exactly. And that's important.
Because without consequences, behavior doesn't change.
Impressive. That's a very mature observation.
I'm learning.
Now, think about this. Who would be harder to deal with in real life?
Wow, that's a difficult question.
Take your time.
Thinking out loud, Ross would be exhausting, too emotional, too intense.
That's fair.
Continuing, but Phoebe feels unpredictable.
Explain that.
You never know if she's joking or being serious.
Yes, that uncertainty can be stressful.
So, Ross is difficult but predictable.
Exactly.
And Phoebe is calm but unpredictable.
That's the contrast.
I think Phoebe might be harder to deal with.
A lot of people would agree with you.
Really?
Yes, because emotional unpredictability creates tension.
That makes sense.
And remember, Phoebe often controls the tone of conversations.
Yeah, she changes the mood quickly.
Exactly. That gives her power in the group.
So she influences everyone.
Yes, more than people realize.
That's actually kind of scary.
Welcome to the theory.
Laughing. I didn't expect Friends to be this deep.
Smiling tone. Most people don't.
Thoughtful. So the real question is not who is worse.
Go on.
Reflective. The real question is who affects the group more.
Impressive. That's a very good question.
Continuing, and maybe the answer is Phoebe.
Calm, confident. Maybe it is. So, if Phoebe affects the group more than people think, what does that mean for the story?
It means we need to watch the show in a different way.
Exactly. Not just for the jokes, but for the behavior.
Yeah, because now it feels less like a simple comedy.
And more like a study of personalities.
That's actually very true. Each character represents a type of person.
Yes, and Phoebe represents something very specific.
What do you think she represents?
She represents the person who looks harmless but influences everything.
That's powerful.
Think about real life. Every group has someone like that.
Yeah, someone who is funny, different, but also unpredictable.
Exactly. And people usually don't question that person.
Because they seem safe.
Yes, that's the key word. Safe.
But maybe they are not always safe.
Exactly.
This makes me think about something else.
What?
Maybe the group needs Phoebe, even with her flaws.
Why do you say that?
Because she changes the dynamic. She breaks patterns.
That's true.
Without her, the group might be too normal.
Too predictable.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe her chaos has a purpose.
That's an interesting way to see it.
Sometimes a difficult personality creates balance in a group.
Even if it causes problems?
Yes, because it forces people to react, adapt, and grow.
That's actually very deep.
Now let's look at Ross again.
Okay.
Ross is often seen as the problem, but he is also very human.
Yeah, he makes mistakes that feel real.
He loves deeply, he gets hurt, he overthinks. That's very relatable.
A lot of people see themselves in Ross,
Exactly.
but not many people see themselves in Phoebe.
Yes, because Phoebe is more unusual.
So people don't analyze her the same way
Right, they focus on what is familiar.
and ignore what is different.
Exactly.
So maybe Phoebe is not more evil, just less understood.
That's a very fair conclusion.
And maybe that's why people like her so much.
Why?
Because she feels free. She doesn't follow normal rules.
Yes, she represents freedom,
And people admire that.
even if that freedom sometimes hurts others.
Yeah.
That's the complexity of her character.
So in the end, she is not a villain.
No,
But she is not as innocent as people think.
exactly.
She is a mix of kindness, chaos, honesty, and manipulation.
That's a perfect description.
I learned a lot from this discussion.
Me too.
So what should the audience take from this?
Don't judge characters too quickly.
Look at actions, not just personality,
Pay attention to small details.
because they show the truth,
And remember, every character has layers.
just like real people.
Exactly.
I think that's why Friends is still so popular today.
Yes, it's simple on the surface, but deeper when you look closely.
And now I definitely want to watch it again,
This time with a more critical eye.
especially when Phoebe is talking.
Especially.
It's funny. One small change in perspective can change everything.
That's the power of analysis.
And good conversation.
Exactly.